Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy 24/7 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy 24/7 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy 24/7 podcast.
Well, they did it again. Vanderbilt knocks off number 9 Kentucky right here at Memorial Gymnasium, 74-69. I'm joined by Joey Dwyer, Robbie Weinstein as well. Brandon Bigsby getting set up. Before we get into anything, I want to get to our sponsor, the Wash House. So you're dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you usually enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of: your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today to get your time back. Joey, I don't know what to say again for the second straight weekend. Vanderbilt pulls it off. Again, we've got Robbie in here. He was here with us in the booth. Brandon Bigsby also alongside. Joey, we'll start with you. Your reaction to what you saw tonight.
Well, I think the biggest thing that I take away today is that last Saturday wasn't a fluke. I think this team has a chance to do this more often than we think it can. I think this team should be held to a different standard than a lot of Vanderbilt basketball teams have been. It's beaten 2 top 10 teams in a week, and it didn't look all that uncharacteristic doing it any of the times. Today went down late in the game, but stormed its way back. It was up by 14 at one point today, and then found its way back into the game, figured out that, hey, we can go beat a team like this. And I think this team has confidence. This team has a chance too. And looking at today and looking at last week with the resume they already had, it feels like they have a real chance to be an NCAA tournament team. And now they have 3 quad 1 wins. They really don't have any bad losses. I think today gives you another huge step towards that goal. And man, is it a special feeling when this place gets going. It was going today. There was a lot of Kentucky fans, but that didn't matter. And it didn't matter how many shots Kentucky hit. It didn't matter that they outshot them from the field and from 3. Vanderbilt finds a way to win. And Brandon, that matters a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it matters in a massive way for this Vanderbilt team. And, you know, we talked about it last week, how wins like this kind of bring your program something. It brings fan investment and it brings belief within your program. If you didn't believe after last week, and now for Vanderbilt to go in and win this game, and not just win it, but the way they did it. They were up by 14.5. Kentucky storms all the way back. You kind of think of about 6 minutes to go. Kentucky's up by 5 or 7. You're like, oh man, this might turn the other direction. And there was one sequence that I don't think anybody is talking about enough that I thought was really, really pivotal. Jalen Carey hitting a massive 3 on the offensive end to cut it down to 5. Then he had a massive block on the other side as well. They gave Vanderbilt the ball back. It felt like from that point forward, along with Tyler Tanner coming in the game and making the impact that he did, things completely turned the opposite direction. I mean, Kentucky ended this game on a 2-minute and 56-second scoring drought. They turned the ball over 3 times in that span, and Vanderbilt went on a 6-0 run in that span. So not only did Vanderbilt show that it can get a lead on one of these teams, it didn't fluke its way into this win, but they had to battle a little bit of adversity as well. And Mark Byington said himself after the game, hey, we're expecting a run like this. We know it's going to happen. The question is, how do we respond to it? They responded admirably, and they were able to do enough down the stretch to close it out for what is not just a massive win for now and for a tournament resume, but I think genuinely does put Vanderbilt now on the national radar and the national scope, to where this is a program that isn't the same little old Vanderbilt that it was the last 6 or 7 seasons. At least as of today, that's how it feels for sure.
Robbie, Vandy has beaten 2 top 10 teams in a season for the first time since 2006-07. It's been a long time coming for back-to-back wins like this. From your experience, you went here, you were a student here. I mean, these last couple of atmospheres and games at Memorial, I'm interested to hear, your perspective on it, whether you've seen or witnessed games like this, but also, what you saw today.
Yeah, not many like this, and not many like the Tennessee game last weekend. I remember when I was a freshman at Vandy in this would have been January 2014. I showed up for an 11 a.m. game against Texas A&M, and Vandy wasn't any good that year, and Texas A&M wasn't either. But the student section was empty with like 10 minutes before the game, and nobody was at the game. And so it's been a while. Like, I mean, there have been a couple of NCAA tournament appearances since then, but like what stands out to me is they are now 16-4. Guys, they only need like 4 more wins or something like that to basically lock in an NCAA tournament spot, and it is January 25th. So that, like, I mean, I think it really puts into perspective. This has not, of course, Vandy back in the day was a wonderful program. It's been a long time, right? And they are really close, honestly, to locking in, postseason spot. Which, to do that in the first year under a new head coach is a big deal. And I think what's just surprising to me is obviously the transfer portal introduces a lot of variance, and, you can have a much worse team than you're expecting or a much better team than you're expecting. But what surprises me is just like they're going to make the tournament easily at this rate, unless they really collapse. It's, of course, a very tough league, and you don't know, could they go through a rough patch? Of course they could. Like, probably just about every team in the SEC will at some point. But they are really, really close. And, I mean, they're on pace to have a winning record in the league. So the non-conference schedule is definitely going to hurt them pretty badly. But if you're like 10-8 in SEC, you're going to be like a 6 seed. I mean, that's pretty crazy compared to, considering what we thought coming into the season.
And after the game, Coach Mark Byington talked about how early in that second half, Kentucky got hot. And I look at you guys in the booth, and it didn't feel great for Vanderbilt when Kentucky came out of that halftime break. Byington said he got his guys together. We needed a psychology break. We needed to just settle our guys down and get back to doing what, he said we might have forgotten what we did in the first half. They played really well in the first half. Joey, I think getting back to that and just simplifying things, they had another 4-minute scoring drought. But Brandon's right. That 3 from Carey was huge, and it cut it to 4. It's not like Vanderbilt took the lead there, but you stopped the bleeding and you quieted the Kentucky fans down a little bit. And then, Robbie, you point this out at the beginning of your story. Nichols' 3, there were some winning plays tonight. Tanner's steal, could have been the winning play, but Hogarth drives in, could have been called a travel. There could have been a lot of things there. Almost lost control of the ball. Finds Nickel, and Joey, he knocks it down. This team finds ways to make winning plays, specifically at home, and specifically the last couple Saturdays. I know we'll talk a lot about Tanner and his pass to McLaughlin and the steal, but that Nickel shot was huge.
Yeah, I mean, he's feeling it. Tyler Nickel, throughout a lot of the early season, we had talked about it on here, and he talked about it tonight. A lot of uncharacteristic bad performances out of him. Tonight, Alabama and Tennessee were 3 of his better games at Vanderbilt. He's playing his best basketball right now. And I thought that shot he hit today was the biggest he's hit here. That was a huge, huge shot. And for Vanderbilt to be down 7 after being up 14 at the break, after having all the momentum and having it sucked away from them, to find a way to win that game, that's unbelievable to me. To see that group against that team in blue over there with all the 5 stars and all the huge transfers that everybody in the country wanted, Vanderbilt went down to them with a couple minutes left. This Kentucky team has beat Florida. They beat Gonzaga in Seattle. And what's their other big win that I noted? There's another huge win on their schedule. Vanderbilt comes in and says, you're not winning here. That's a huge testament to what this group is made of. And Jason Edwards, I thought, was pretty candid tonight talking about, man, there's been guys who maybe have been over-competitive at times, who have wanted the ball in their hands too much. I thought tonight, you saw at times maybe they forced on a possession or two, but that didn't define them down the stretch. I thought what defined them was the big shots they hit, the Tyler Tanner steal and the Tyler Tanner bucket late, the Tyler Nickel 3, the Jalen Carey 3. Those are the ones you'll remember, not A.J. Hogarth forcing it. And everything seemed to be working for this team tonight, Brandon. But just to find a way to win after being down 7 when it looked like it could get out of hand, that's a big deal as well.
Yeah, I completely agree, Joey. And, I think something else that really stands out to me, too, is that, obviously Kentucky being a team, you talked about how many stars they have and how many talented players are on that roster. We talked a little bit about tournament and March Madness, and there is one really familiar name on this Kentucky team in Lamont Butler, who, if you remember, starred on that San Diego State team a couple of years ago that made it all the way to the championship game and ended up losing to UConn. I mean, Lamont Butler was pretty much a non-factor tonight. 6 points, 2 for 7.
Huge turnovers late.
Well, yeah, multiple turnovers late, 6 of them. He fouled out, had a lot of trouble keeping with guys like Jason Edwards, like Tyler Tanner at times. It felt like Vanderbilt was, despite maybe some of that talent gap that may be there. I mean, Owe obviously had a big night. Alamanor had a nice little stretch there at the beginning. Despite some of those things, it didn't seem to matter. Vanderbilt, despite the runs, they were able to fight back. They were never too far out of this game when it felt like Kentucky was kind of starting to take a little bit of that momentum. Like Billy had mentioned, they were able to find that run back. I mean, it's a lot of things from Vanderbilt teams that it feels like was missing over the last few years. And I don't think that there's anything more impressive about the fact that you have to remember this is a group of guys that, I mean, it's 9, 10 new players, multiple of them transfers, never have played together. I mean, this team is just growing and growing and growing in front of our very eyes. And it's not always going to look pretty. We saw that in the first 10 minutes of this half. But when this team is clicking, when they have it going, when they're cohesive, I think we've seen now to where it's not just a team that can maybe sneak up on a team if all the circumstances are right. They can go in and win some ball games. I mean, Vanderbilt wasn't perfect in this game. They got out rebounded 43-30. They shot 4 for 11 from the free throw line. The percentages, both from the field and three, were lower than Kentucky's. The biggest thing, I think, was just the turnover. 17 for Kentucky compared to just 5 for Vanderbilt and 21 assists out of the 29 made field goals they had. They shared the ball really well. They were clean. They were efficient. I mean, it feels like maybe this team, what we thought the ceiling could be, maybe it's a little bit more than that potentially. And I'm not saying this is a team that's a lot to make the tournament or they're going to win the SEC, but I think that considering what we thought this team was heading into the season and heading into the SEC schedule, it just feels like they keep finding a way to push the bar a little bit higher and raising the expectations a little bit higher, which is so impressive, not just for Mark Byington and the staff, but just the way that this team is really grouped together and bought into their roles to really make this thing work as a group that, again, most of them had never played together before this season.
We're going to get Chris in here a little bit later, but Robbie, I want to give you a chance here because I know you got to hop off here soon. We did get a question. Is Vandy ranked tomorrow? I didn't even think about that until the last 5-10 minutes, as Brandon, I think, mentioned it to us. I want to throw that at you, Robbie. You think Vanderbilt has done enough to be ranked, but also, looking at the schedule, where are the wins for them? And I know you mentioned it's just 4 more games they've got to get here. They don't have to do a whole lot else. I'm interested to see if they'll be ranked, but also, when do we say this is a tournament team? When do we put the stamp on?
I would think, I mean, it would be tough to, despite the non-conference schedule, it'd be tough to keep them out if they had like 20 or 21 wins, especially with some good wins. Granted, their best 2 are at home, which is a slight issue, but with the AP top 25, I actually have that pulled up on my phone right now. I do think they are deserving. I definitely think they deserve to be in there. I don't really, to me, losing by 15 or 17 or whatever it was at Alabama, I don't think that's a big deal. Alabama does that to a lot of teams, and I didn't think that was a very good matchup for Vandy because Alabama plays the same way but has better players. Vandy was, they were 25, 26, 27, or 27 or 28 actually last week, but they were pretty far behind the last top 25 team, which was Louisville. They had only 35 votes compared to 125. I think, here's the thing, unfortunately for Vandy, AP voters are lazy, man. Like, honestly, they don't want to, if they had a certain team, maybe lined up that they were considering last week, they would move that team in, even if, they would probably just look at the scores and see, well, Vandy lost by, they lost this blowout at Alabama, and so that kind of cancels out the Kentucky game. So I would guess that they probably don't get in. I think that they should. I would say that it helps a lot, though, with the laziness where, when you are probably leading Sports Center tonight or close to it due to the court storming, that is going to grab people's attention. In terms of, like, additional wins that they need to get to, I can pull up their schedule, but I know the next home game is against Texas. Vandy is better than Texas. They are going to be favored in that game. So that's one that they would have to feel pretty good about. They've got, let's see, at Oklahoma and at Florida. I mean, if they can split those, that would be great. Again, I think, if they could get like 2 more road wins out of this group, which they've got 6 road games left, going 2-4, I don't think is a huge ask. But a lot of bubble teams for the NCAA tournament will literally win like 1 or 2 road games all season. So they've already got 2. They've got a couple neutral court wins, or like 3, I think, already. And so if they were able to get to that 5, 6, 7 wins away from home, most of which were against decent teams, that looks really good on a resume when it comes to, time to seed the teams.
Yeah. Well, Robbie, I know you probably got to get going here and do some recruiting stuff. Appreciate it. And we'll see you, I think, maybe the Texas game. We'll see.
Yep. Thanks for having me. The football visitors were at the game today, I believe. So that probably made a pretty good impression on them.
I would think so. I would think so. Thanks, Robbie.
All right. I will see you guys later.
That's Robbie Weinstein, the classic. Thanks, Robbie, for all he does for Vandy 24/7. Guys, there was so much in this game, and you mentioned Tanner, Brandon. He comes up big. I mean, is there a game this season where, at least a home game, that us three have been at, where Tyler Tanner doesn't come up huge in at least one moment or multiple? And he did it today in a huge swing. It was, back-to-back plays. He gets the ball in the corner. Forget how much time was left, but gets the ball in the corner and, makes a nice move to get away from one of Kentucky's guards. It might have been Butler, but one of Kentucky's old experienced guards, and then makes a perfect dish to McLaughlin for a layup, and then pickpockets Lamont Butler. That's back-to-back Saturdays now where he's pickpocketed a veteran guard who's played a ton of basketball, and he finishes it up over Butler. And you go back in the first half, Hogard had the same chance off of a turnover to just lay it up, but he tried to dish it off to I think McLaughlin it was. So even in the tightest moments when you need him most, Tanner seems to make a play, whether it's on defense. So Joey, we cannot not talk about that because that was such a huge swing. There were some bigger plays later after that, but man, he's not a freshman.
No, and Mark Byington even said, I don't know if there's a lot of 18-year-olds out playing a moment like that, but if they're like Tyler Tanner, I'll play him. And you see it back-to-back Saturdays. He stripped Sakai Ziegler, took it the other way last week. And even on that fast break today, after he stripped Kentucky's guard, I think it was Butler, he goes, and that's not an easy finish that he made. I thought when I saw him go up, I thought he was going to get blocked or he was going to miss the layup, but just kind of contorts his body to get it to go. And another guard who really stepped up, Jason Edwards, we haven't talked a ton about him. Guys, what a presser Jason Edwards delivered us, and what a game he delivered Vanderbilt. That guy just made of the right stuff, and I think he was a guy that we almost had to learn how to cover because we saw him play early in the year, and we were like, man, this guy, kind of a shot chucker, things along those lines. And, man, he just makes them. That's his game. That's what he does well.
He's a shot maker.
And he's efficient. He hits them when they matter. Jason Edwards has been basically the perfect superstar for this Vanderbilt team, and maybe he's not a superstar around the league, but within the context of what this team is and what they need him to do, he has been a superstar for what his role is. I think he is really picking it up and really playing the best basketball that he has played throughout the year. Obviously, had that early stretch against Mississippi State and LSU where the injury hampered him, but since then, man, he's been a fighter. And Mark Byington said something great about him. He's like got a battery pack on the back of him. He's like an energizer. And I thought everybody fed off of it today. Another thing, too, they beat Kentucky, who obviously a team with a ton of talent, a ton of depth, a team that plays pretty similarly to Vanderbilt. Tyler Nickel had 11 points. One of the better games he had. I thought he really stepped up. And, again, he's had a great week. But also you look at A.J. Hogard. He only had 5. He was 2 for 8. MJ Collins had 5. He was 2 for 8. Nobody really outside of their main guys had it going. And they still find a way to win. I thought their defense was really good in the first half. They really got stops. Devin McLaughlin, another guy who deserves credit. Mark Byington was asked about size after the game and talked about how McLaughlin's size was a step below the Kentucky bigs, but it didn't necessarily matter today. And I think Vanderbilt has kind of embraced the role of the underdog in the front court and throughout its entire roster. And that's a reason to attribute today's win to, Brandon.
Yeah, and there's two stats actually about Tyler Tanner that I feel like I have to mention just because it really adds context in terms of how big he was in Vanderbilt winning this game. Tyler Tanner checked in with 12:01 to go in the second half. It was 51-48. Vanderbilt had just given up a massive run to Kentucky. Tyler Tanner never checked out again after that. And not only that, but he was the only Vanderbilt player that ended the second half with a positive plus minus at +5. That is how big of an impact Tyler Tanner had. And for somebody that was a 3-star recruit, local guy, never had played against Kentucky, still was getting used to the SEC, still getting used to playing this long, this physical, back and forth brand of basketball. And remember, Mark Byington had to convince Tyler Tanner to stay. That was a Jerry Stackhouse recruit. That was Jerry Stackhouse's staff that brought Tanner here. Tanner bought into what Byington was selling. He stayed, got him to commit here. And here he is helping Vanderbilt win really, really massive games. But something else that you mentioned too, both Billy and Joey, talking about Jason Edwards. And look, I know it's just January 25th. There's a lot of basketball to be played. There's still business for Vanderbilt to take care of. But Jason Edwards feels like the type of guy that can be a March Madness darling. I mean, the way he plays, the story that he has, shifty, dynamic, 6'1" guard, started out as a JUCO guy and went to North Texas. Now he's starring for a Vanderbilt team that hasn't been in the tournament in 8 years. If Vanderbilt does get to that point, Jason Edwards, he has, in my opinion, that ability to become a national story if he goes into the tournament and is able to play the way he has been. He's just made of the right stuff, not just in terms of his ability, but just his story, what he says, who he is as a person. Just a massive, massive role he played in this game. And I know Chris obviously just joined us, so I want to hear his thoughts. But those were just two things I think that really, really stuck out to me. That guard tandem of Edwards and Tanner, I don't know where Vanderbilt would have been in this game without them down the stretch.
Chat room's on fire. Feel free to continue to fire away your comments and your questions. We do have a couple to answer a little bit later. But Chris, first off, 10U Lee squad 5-0. Vandy gets the win. Pretty good Saturday for the Lee family. But Chris, pretty good Saturday and pretty good season so far for Mike Byington and Vanderbilt. I guess you didn't get a chance to watch a ton of it. I know you'll probably watch it back, but man, they did it again.
Yeah, I watched the first 35 minutes, and we had to hop in the car for the last 5 to get to the game my son was playing in and I was coaching, and he was kind of giving me the play-by-play. We had the audio on, and he kept saying, "Dad, watch this, watch this." I was like, "Buddy, I don't think you want me doing that while I'm driving." But he was very excited. Man, what a win. Like, if you had told us a year ago they were going to be 16-4 and they were going to have just knocked off back-to-back top 10 teams, it's amazing what they've done. I mean, it really is. I remember we had our stuff during the SEC tournament when, is he going to get fired? Is he not going to get fired? And they made the call. And I know I thought, and I guess you guys probably did too, I just thought this is a big rebuild. It's a big, big rebuild. And I was thinking this week, tell me if I'm wrong, guys, and I will give Jerry Stackhouse credit for one thing. Brandon's right. Tyler Tanner was his find.
Yeah.
And some people thought that when he didn't retain the job that Tyler might look elsewhere. And he didn't. And credit to Mark Byington for that. But my goodness, this is a crazy turnaround in one season. I know the coach that everybody was talking about is the coach of the year in the SEC was the guy on the other baseline coming in. It ought to be the guy on the baseline to our right as we sit in the press box. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from anything that Mark Pope has done, because it's been terrific in his own right. But you can sell Kentucky. I mean, you pick up the phone and, call little Billy or little Joey who wants to play basketball somewhere. Hey, do you want to come play at Kentucky? Yes, everybody in the country wants to come play at Kentucky. I don't think that Vanderbilt gets the same reception. And for Mark Byington to walk in here, be 4-3 in the SEC, there's a decent chance they're ranked Monday. I think, honest to God, I think if they had stayed the course with Stackhouse, I think 0-18 was on the table this year. It's not just that they're 4-3; it's that he flipped it from what could have been, God knows what.
They did it. They did it again, Joey. And we've got questions about the tournament, where the net, where they'll be in the net, and all that will be interesting. But I want to talk about after the game. Students stormed the floor. By the way, that was pretty impressive. I mean, they just bulldozed. The security guards were like all lined up, and they bulldozed the security guards. And Brandon got a great video of one of the security guards acting like a linebacker in the NFL, trying to stop. He didn't stop anybody, but he was trying. And walking to the presser, Mark Pope was already in there. Candace obviously just overjoyed the players, and they got fined. They'll be fined $500,000. It was $250,000 last weekend. It was $100,000 against Alabama in football. Now it's $500,000. I don't even know what the next one is. What the fourth? I mean, they do $750,000. So, but that will stop. It probably won't see another court storm this year. But Joey, I thought it was interesting how Candace in the presser behind us said, "Hey, we're making memories. That's okay. Like, that's okay." Even though we did have proof that she told students that we want to use this for NIL money. So obviously that, you've got that out there. But I thought it was interesting how Byington, he didn't poo-poo it either. He said, we'll get to a point where we don't have to storm the floor, where we're already ranked, we're already favored against a team like this down the road. We'll get there. We're not there yet. So I want these guys to enjoy it. I want the students to enjoy it. Not, important in the span of the game, but I thought that was interesting perspective on, they're not, I don't think anybody's mad about it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. It also goes along with what Chris had to say. This time last year, we had talked about how hard of a rebuild this was, how much they had to overcome on the player personnel side. And we're in the presser tonight, and Mark Byington's talking about how he wants the standard for this program to be so great that you don't have to court storm when you beat a top 10 team like Kentucky or Tennessee. What a unbelievable turnaround. And just being down there, just feeling the jubilance surrounding this program is something unbelievable relative to what we experienced last year when Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham and everybody on Kentucky's roster did whatever they wanted to. I thought that was one of the more embarrassing games Vanderbilt had last year. And it's kind of like Tennessee, where Tennessee didn't beat them by a whole lot, but that was a really embarrassing day for Vanderbilt basketball. Kentucky beat the brakes off of Vanderbilt last year, and it looked like they could have done that today for a period of time as well, because Vanderbilt had that huge lead. Kentucky had outscored it by like 25 points in the first half, or in the start of the second half, and Vanderbilt just finds a way to win. They find a way to overcome the odds, and this team has done that all year. Jason Edwards talked about how they're going to go into this game, and they're going to go into games like this for a while, and nobody's going to expect them to win a game like this. And they've done it time and time again. And I asked him why should people think that this isn't a surprise? Why should people not be surprised? And he said, we're a group of fighters. Vanderbilt believed going into this game. Billy, like you said, MJ Collins was in our YouTube chat on Thursday morning. He was in the back of his classroom of 20 to 25 people on his computer, sneaking his computer, and he typed, "We're going to beat Kentucky by 10. And Billy and I didn't even know if it was the real MJ Collins typing that. We were like, what an unbelievable message to send in there. Can you believe that somebody would make an account of MJ Collins and make him look bad by saying they were going to beat Kentucky? Billy, it was him, and they did it again.
I mean,
it's like Diego Pavia calling your shot.
Well, it's like CJ
Taylor. That's what it was. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, because, again, I watched the first 35 and I followed the last 5. But I'm looking at the box score and from what my son was telling me, and again, I didn't have any time to go read game stories. I literally watched the final couple of minutes from the stands while I'm scouting the team we're playing next week. He's in my ear saying this just happened, that just happened, and I'm reading the box score, because when I saw Kentucky get loose in the second half and started hitting shot after shot after shot, that is what scared me. That's why I didn't think they'd win today. I thought the size on the wing and the ability to get out there, and let's face it, Vanderbilt has not guarded the 3 very well this year. Sometimes 3-point defense is luck, but I mean, they have left some shooters wide open at times. Did that at times today. but it felt like the thing that won them the game was the defense. And like Lamont Butler is not the point guard that you want to run up against. He's played a ton of ball. He doesn't turn it over. And it looked to me from looking at the stat sheet, what was it, 17 turnovers to 5? They got pounded on the glass. And part of when Kentucky made that run, rebounding killed Vanderbilt. But they went back to what had worked. And that's pickpocketing people from all kinds of places. And to me, I don't know what the story was that you guys felt as you watched the press conference and that unfolded, but it felt to me like the turnovers, and you guys were talking about Tyler Tanner when I walked in. I feel like that feels like the story coming out of this.
The first half, guys, was normal Vanderbilt. They're forcing turnovers. They're getting clean strips. They're getting out in transition. The Edwards swing pass to Carey and the dunk. I mean, that's this Vanderbilt team, right? They get out and run because of turnovers. That's their identity. Chris, they didn't do that really for the first part of that second half. And, Byington called a great timeout that Stack wouldn't have called. He called a great timeout. They were still up by 6, I think. 41-35, great timeout. That was the psychology timeout, I guarantee you, where he said, guys, we forgot about all that we did in the first half against the same team that's on the other side. And Joey, they got back to it. They got back to pressuring on defense. I'm going out on a limb, Chris, and say this might be one of the better defenses in the SEC. I mean, there's a lot out there, but like they forced so much chaos that Kentucky just folded. 17 turnovers that it's be hard to win games. But Joey, that's how I answer that question for Chris. They got back to their identity in forcing turnovers. And really, Magnon was a huge part of that Tennessee game. Magnon sat for a while there. And Hogard got banged up too. He had to sit for a couple of minutes there late. They pick each other up, and Byington's got their back. Have we ever seen Byington rip a player and go throw him on the bench? Like, yeah, I'm sure there's some constructive criticism at times, but he's got his guys back. That feeds them confidence. So, like, that's what I say, Joey, that they got back to their identity.
I want to go off the identity part. Chris, give me a second. I want to go off the identity part because we had talked a lot about through non-conference play, like their recipe is forcing turnovers, and they're getting so many free baskets that I don't know what's going to happen when they run up on an old SEC guard who doesn't turn it over. They've done that the last 3 games, and Alabama, they didn't force a ton, but today they forced some turnovers. They forced 17. Zakai Ziegler had that huge turnover late in the game against Tennessee. I think their recipe might work, and we were pretty skeptical that it could and that they would probably have to sit back a little bit more defensively than we thought they would. But, guys, I'm not sure that defensive identity is something they're going to have to change. And I asked Mark Byington a few weeks ago, and I was like, when you run up on Zakai Ziegler and Mark Sears and Lamont Butler, are you going to have to drop back a little more? Are you going to have to stop being as aggressive? He's like, no, we're going to keep being aggressive. And I was thinking to myself, like, man, I don't know if he means that. And it looks to me like that identity could work and the way they want to play could work. This isn't even the best roster that Mark Byington could have at Vanderbilt. I think down the line he could get transfer classes that are better and better than this one. And Chris, their identity seems to have a chance at this.
I went to look up, Billy, they be the best team in the SEC. Ken Palm's got him 13 of 16 overall in all games, 11 of 16 in SEC games. But there's a stat, and it was dropped on a broadcast a couple of weeks ago, and I have not been able to find this. I've Googled it. I don't know where someone tracks it. Apparently, 2 or 3 games back, they were leading the country in points off turnovers, which tells me that it's Billy, you're on mute.
Sorry, that's how they, if their offense is in a rut, that's how they get out of it.
Point is, there's more value to the defense than what is showing up on the defensive stat sheet right now.
Right. So that's what happened, Chris. They got back to their identity there, first part of that second half. I want to try to get some questions in here. And again, Chris, if you got to get going, feel free to hop out whenever. But there was a question.
Let's give Bigsby a touch.
Yeah. Here we go. Bigsby. Sorry, I want to get this. Okay. For Billy, Brandon, Joey, Chris will get in here as well. Which player on the roster is most impressive to you guys? Brandon, most impressive player on this roster to you?
You know, I feel like there's a few different directions you could take this because each one of these guys are so different from one another. I think you could say McLaughlin for the reasons to where he's had to kind of adapt to a role that he wasn't necessarily supposed to be in, almost kind of being like their pseudo five. You could say Tyler Tanner because he's a freshman doing what he's doing. But I have to go back to Jason Edwards. And, you know, I don't want to go as far as to say it's where this team kind of runs and stops as Jason Edwards does, but he is so vital to what this Vanderbilt team does and what they are, it feels like. Not just in terms of the production offensively. Obviously, he is a dynamic scorer that can shoot it seemingly anywhere on the floor. He is a spark plug for them. Remember, he had, 10 points before the media timeout? That was really what kind of charged Vanderbilt early on in this game. He did something similar against Tennessee just a week ago. But just you can tell that he really is bought into what this program is trying to do. And for a guy like Jason Edwards that, you know, coming into the season, there were the questions of, oh, he's a 6'1" guard that relies on having to shoot a ton of perimeter shots. That's not going to work in the SEC. Well, here he is in the SEC, 18 points against Kentucky. I think he had 16 or 18 against Alabama just a few days ago. Had a great game, about 18 points against Tennessee. He is playing his best basketball of the season, arguably, and has been Vanderbilt's one of their most important players, where there were a lot of people that came into the season saying, hey, Jason Edwards, that's great that you did that in North Texas. That's the American Conference. You can't do that in the SEC. I think just his ability, his leadership, and just the role and the criticalness that he plays on this team makes him so impressive for so many reasons. And again, I think there's a lot of different answers and a lot of different ways you could attack it. But for what Jason Edwards is able to do on a consistent nightly basis, outside of maybe that Mississippi State or that Missouri game because of the injury, it was very obvious he was bothered by that. There's been very few times I feel like where you left the game and said, man, Jason Edwards really just didn't have it tonight. He failed Vanderbilt tonight. There's not been a time I can remember where I really just thought that and said, Jason Edwards didn't have a lot going for him. It just feels like night after night, he always does something, whether it's a certain shot or a stretch that propels this Vanderbilt team. He did it again today, and I think that for me at least, he's probably my answer. But there's a few different directions you can go with that for sure.
The one thing I would say about Jason Edwards that we haven't already said is you look at a guy like that and you look at the recipe to success for a player in the SEC. Jason Edwards doesn't really check many of those boxes. And that's what makes this so impressive because you're looking at him and you're saying, wow, he's not physically imposing. And you're watching him dribble and put it on the floor and you're like, man, he's not taking shots that you'd think of as conventionally great shots. And you talk to Mark Byington about it and you say, do you want to change anything about Jason Edwards' game? And I think he would tell you, no, I don't want to change a thing about Jason Edwards. And that's what makes him so special. He's such a unique player with such a unique story. He comes from Miles College. He said today, I didn't think I'd ever be playing against a team like Kentucky. I didn't know if I'd ever be beating a team like Kentucky. He's doing it, and I think we've got to give him some shine for just the way he's doing it because it's so unconventional. It's not like a Liam Robbins where he's 7'1" and can shoot it, so you're expecting him to be great. You look at him, and you're not thinking that he's the best player on this team unless you've watched him before. I also think Devin McLaughlin needs a ton of shine. He has not gotten much of it throughout the year. He just comes in, puts his head down every day, and doesn't have a great night every night, but I think has been such a crucial piece of this team that we haven't talked about nearly enough. 14 points tonight. That putback he had on this end, that's one of the plays that Vanderbilt fans will remember for a long time about this season. You'll remember the Jalen Carey three. You'll remember the nickel three. You'll remember the Chaz Lanier missed free throw against Tennessee. I think you're also going to remember when Vanderbilt had its back against the wall, they missed a shot, Devin McLaughlin goes up and puts it back. You're going to remember the plays against South Carolina where Devin McLaughlin blocked the shot on the other end and then comes down and gets a putback on this end. Those two guys, I think, have gotten they've gotten their credit, but I think just the way they've done it, and with McLaughlin being undersized, with Edwards being undersized, those guys have found a way to be real contributors in this league, Billy, and that is a really special thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to say Jason Edwards. I think he's the most impressive. I mean, I don't know how many times I've looked over at you guys and just wide-eyed and said, did he just do that? Yeah, he did. But it's not just him. There's some games where we haven't talked all about Jason Edwards. That's the best part about this team. Another question for Matthew and Chris. I'll throw it to you on this one. Thoughts on an immediate extension for Byington? Need to get ahead of Virginia and Indiana coming after him. I know this is probably something we'll talk about down the road, but the more wins like this keep coming, the more schools like that will keep calling, or at least trying to. And you're muted, by the way, Chris.
Sorry. Let me answer the last one first, because I think the most indispensable guy, there's two guys that come to mind. They're the two you mentioned. One is McLaughlin, and you could sort of argue that McLaughlin has a counterpart in Jalen Carey, but he's not as consistent, and I think McLaughlin does some more things. But I think Jason Edwards is the right answer. Guys, I've seen a lot of guards play here long before I ran the site and did the podcast. They've never had another guard like him. Like, he's a problem for everybody now.
Yeah.
He scored on, the only time he's not scored with any degree on anybody was the Mississippi State game, where he was coming off injury, and boy, how would you like to have that one over again? Don't think they win, but you remember how awful they looked offensively for about half that game. You put a healthy Jason Edwards in that game, I'd like to see what it looks like. When Kentucky and Tennessee and Alabama are having problems with Jason Edwards, you got a dude. Yep. And number two, you guys didn't hear this because you were in the press box and I was watching from home on ESPN. I did not know this. ESPN claimed that he led the country in scoring 2 years in high school. Did you all know that?
Yeah. I didn't know that.
How do you do that at Parkview High School and not get any D1 offers? How does that happen? I don't care if you're 4'11". If you're leading the country in scoring in Atlanta at a place like that, how in the world did this kid not have offers?
He's small. That's all I can say. But that you forget about that pretty quick when he hits a shot over Amari Williams like he did, that fadeaway. And he finishes at the rim too. He's not just a pure shooter. He is a bucket getter. He scores however he has to. So yeah, it's hard not to say Edwards for this. This question here, I think it's a good one. I think an extension at the end of the season could be coming. It might have to come, right? Yeah. But we can obviously talk more about that.
They need to get ahead of that.
Yeah,
because it's going to be a thing. People are going to be coming.
Yeah, Jason Edwards, D2 to JUCO to mid-major, and now he's in the Power 4. That's all you can say there. I'm trying to make sure we got all the questions covered. Think we do. Guys, we're 60-plus live viewers, 30 minutes in. This winning thing helps a lot, and our sponsors do as well. We got to the Wash House read at the beginning of it, but we'll go around the room here, wrap it up with some parting thoughts. Joey, I'll start with you. What'd you learn again about this team, and what does today's win mean for their NCAA tournament chances?
Yeah, I was going to say, I learned that I think they're an NCAA tournament team. And going into the week, I thought that, but I don't know that I had enough to really proclaim that because they had a really hard stretch ahead. They've proven they can beat just about anybody in this league. And there's going to be games where they get ran off the floor like Alabama again, I would think. But that's not who this team is. I think this team is a group of winners that can do a lot of things that people said they couldn't do. And that's going to be shown throughout the rest of the year, I would think. I don't think this is the end for this team. I don't think that they're going to be defined by this game or the Kentucky or the Tennessee game. I think they're going to be defined as a team that has a chance to do something that this program hasn't done in a long time, and a team that could make the NCAA tournament for the first time in a long time. This was a special day for Vanderbilt basketball in a special season. You don't throw that word around for this program very often. It's felt like there's been special stretches. I don't know that we've seen a consistently good product like this throughout the entirety of the year in a long time. Certainly haven't since I've been covering the team. And man, this has been a fun ride to cover. And I certainly don't think it's the end, Brandon.
Yeah, Joey, I definitely agree with you. And there's actually something really interesting that I just found that I think that, I know you've been covering the team for a few years. I know Chris and Billy will both appreciate this because they probably remember this. It was 5 years ago today. It was January 25th, 2020, where Vanderbilt matched Sewanee for the longest losing streak in SEC history. That was 5 years ago to this day. It was a 90-64 loss to South Carolina. It was their 24th consecutive SEC loss. They didn't break it until like 2 weeks after. They beat number 18 LSU in that game. That was the Saban lead, Maxwell Evans game where they combined for like 64. But to think about where this program was at that point to now, they're sitting at 16-4. They have a genuine case and a genuine opportunity to be ranked in the top 25 in the next 24 to 48 hours. And we're sitting here saying Vanderbilt, if the tournament field was in today, they would be a lock. And it's not even a question. I mean, just to think about where this program has gone, not just in the 5 years, but just a year from now, none of this seemed even remotely possible. Mark Byington was at James Madison. You had the Jerry Stackhouse tenure and everything going on. No one, I don't think a Vanderbilt fan in their wildest dreams could have imagined a week to where you beat Tennessee at home and you storm the court, and then 7 days later you beat Kentucky at home and you storm the court, and it's two top 10 teams that just went down in your building. And I asked Mark Byington about this during the presser because, he talked about wanting to build Vanderbilt back up as a culture and what this does. And he kind of just said straight up, I'm not thinking about that. I'm on to the next game. I'm on to Oklahoma. And to me, that I think is what is so encouraging. And, you talk about like, do you lock him up now? I think that gives you pretty good reason to. He's not only showing you that he can build this program, but there's the potential for something more. They're not satisfied with being 16-4 and storming the court against Kentucky. There's higher aspirations for them, not just as a team, but as a program. But at the same time, I think you also kind of have to look back a little bit and really just admire what Vanderbilt as a program has done. And that doesn't just go to Mark Byington. Give Candace Story-Lee a ton of credit as well. The way that she went ahead, made the move with Jerry Stackhouse. There was all the talk about, are they going to do it? Are they not going to do it? He just signed the big extension just a couple of years ago. She pulled the trigger, found her guy, hired the right guy, and the results are coming just fruitfully from that. And just the way that Vanderbilt has changed the narrative about themselves so quickly. I know they might be, $500,000 less than they were when they woke up this morning. It will continue to be that. They continue to do this. But to have that moment against a top 10 team, against a blue blood program like Kentucky on national television on ESPN, for a program that's been stuck in the whole Vanderbilt doesn't care about athletics. It's just little old Vanderbilt. And I remember Shea Ralph in the game against Tennessee afterwards. She said, we're not the little sisters of the poor. We're here to win games. We're here to compete for championships. Moments like that, games like this, and stretches like this that Vanderbilt is currently under goes a long way towards doing that. It doesn't mean they're there yet. They still have a long way to go. They still have to keep doing what they're doing. But I think that I've learned that for all the times to where it's like maybe Vanderbilt's back and they weren't necessarily there, something would happen to change, and then it's like, oh, same old Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt basketball doesn't even necessarily feel back. Vanderbilt athletics feels like it might be at the highest point that it has been. And if it can continue on this trajectory, there might genuinely be something special on West End. That's what I learned today.
A week ago, they played a team that was tough as nails, had won on the road, could get into you, could cause you problems at guard. Hadn't seen them play a team like that. They beat them with Chaz Lanier playing well. You could say, okay, well, they've ripped off a bunch of wins in a row. They got a team at home. Memorial's always a tough place to win. Let's see them do it again. Today, they played a team that was a different type of tough matchup. It's one of the best offensive teams in the country. When they've got it going, they might be the best offensive team in the country, Kentucky. Kentucky had been in that spot before. They were down a lot of points at halftime in Seattle to Gonzaga, a team that does not lose in that state a lot. Came back, won that game, did Kentucky. Same spot with Vandy today. Down 13 at half, not looking great. Puts its foot on the gas out of halftime, takes the lead within the 8 minutes. Hitting shots, a lot of blue in that building, a lot of things that could have gone wrong from that point. They didn't go wrong. They got back to winning with big plays, with defense, and now they have knocked off 2 back-to-back teams in 7 days. Totally different types of ball, teams that had a ton of success. And in between, they lost to Alabama. They played Alabama pretty well. It was a 16-point game, but I thought they played well. And Alabama might have been the best team in the country, by the way. I think it's possible. We got a lot of ball to play to go. Right now, that's Auburn, but don't sleep on Alabama as that team. You can't write off anything they've done as a fluke now. It's a tournament team. And you guys had a podcast last week that I listened to. It wasn't there, but if I had been, I would have said this. It's not really about where they are. They are a 10 in Lenardi right now or whatever. It's about they have not played themselves out of position like they had this time 2 years ago. They had to learn the hard way on Selection Sunday. Instead, they have put themselves in position. And today they put themselves in position to be in the tournament with the win. They got it. They've just got to keep doing what they're doing. I'm becoming more of a believer the more I watch them play, because they've got so many guys who contribute on a given night. And again, that is another sign of a well-coached team. They've got guys on the floor with holes in their games, but I think Mark Byington is, for the most part, getting the most out of everybody. He has found a way that all these guys fit, and Vanderbilt basketball is fun to watch again.
Thank goodness. And Joe, you said that you learned that they're a tournament team today. I'm going to go a step further. I think they can make a run in the NCAA tournament. I know it's early, so call me crazy, but with what I've seen so far, that's what I'm basing it off of. If the tournament started tomorrow, I would pick them to make a run. I mean, they're dangerous. And you mentioned that, Chris, they've got so many guys that can go off for you and help you make shots, whether it's Nickel, Edwards, McLaughlin down low, Hogarth distributing. It can be anybody. Now, you need it to be Edwards, I think, most nights, especially against good teams. But that's what I learned. I think this team can do some damage in the tournament. Now, there's always injuries that could happen. There's always, certain things that could go on. But they get a week break here, and then you play at Oklahoma, a team that Vanderbilt can definitely beat. And then you've got a trip to Texas, if I'm not mistaken. And then, Texas comes
Florida
here. Florida, then Texas comes here. My bad. At Florida, then Texas comes here. I might have it all jumbled. And then Auburn eventually comes here as the number 1 team in the country. We'll see if they're still the number 1 team. But still a lot of opportunities. You can't get too high, as Mark Byington said, or else you'll get bumped down a peg. But you can't get too low either. And they didn't get too low after that Alabama game. And Jason Edwards after the game said, I learned that we're tough. This is a tough team. They're not fazed by anything. Chris, I'm glad you mentioned all the blue in there. There was a lot of blue in there. Felt like a Kentucky home game at times. Vanderbilt basketball the past 7-8 years, they fumble the bag there. They fold under pressure, and they don't pull through. This Vanderbilt team found a way to fight through that. And I mean, I'll admit it. I'm surprised. This team's still surprising me. But they fought through that, and can't say enough about it, about their effort, their resiliency. They continue to fight. And Magnon, that effort play right there at the end summed it all up. He was in bounds too and called the timeout in midair. That should have been a Vanderbilt timeout.
I was going to say, did they not get that call? Because that's right when I had to go. My son was watching and said it's going to be their ball, and I watched
one of the best timeout calls I've ever seen.
I could not understand from what little I why was that not their ball? I did not understand that review.
Yeah, they showed it on the Jumbotron here. Magnon, he had his left foot right on the corner.
So that was what it was. It might have been on the line.
So maybe the tip of the toe was on the line. They had a better view of it zoomed in, but I thought it was going to be Vanderbilt's ball. And again, that's a savvy timeout from Mark Byington and really quick reaction time to make that happen. Little things like that are just so impressive of them and just this team in general.
And I want to close it out with a comment from Knox Too Tall. Not that one, but this one. You win in March with guard play, and we have a lot of point guards. That kind of sums it up as well. A lot of guards.
A lot of point guards. 17 of them.
Well, guys, appreciate it. Appreciate all you for hopping in here. Had a lot of viewers, a lot of interaction. Up next, Vanderbilt has this week off, and then they are at Oklahoma this Saturday. That's correct. I'm not going crazy here, by the way.
Get 2 of the next 3, and the chances they don't make the tournament are pretty slim.
Yeah. By the way, I'm getting kicked out of a suite here, so I got to get out of here. But either way, thanks everybody for coming in here today for this podcast. We'll be back here next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Vandy 24/7 podcast.